MKP case study. He saw an audience nobody else was making movies. For Tyler Perry, multiplier, king, and priest, the archetype of redemptive influence. He slept in his car on the same street where his studio now stands. He spent his life savings of $12,000 on a show that drew only 30 people. He attempted suicide twice before he turned 20, and today he owns 330 acres of land that was once a Confederate Army base, ground where soldiers once plotted to keep his ancestors enslaved. What if Tyler Perry's story is not simply a tale of rags to riches, but one of the most dramatic, spiritually loaded enactments of ancient kingdom principles in modern entertainment history? Born Emmett Perry Jr. on September 13, 1969 in New Orleans, Louisiana, Tyler's earliest memories weren't of joy or play, but of survival. He endured years of abuse as a child by his father, whose answer to everything was to beat it out of you. He was also sexually abused by 4 adults at different times during his childhood. To escape the dysfunction, Perry attempted to commit suicide twice during his teenage years. At age 16, Emmett changed his first name to Tyler, a symbolic rebirth, a quiet rebellion, a way to begin anew. His mother took him to church every Sunday. It was there, in the black church, that he first encountered the power of storytelling as healing. The pivot came through an unlikely instrument. One pivotal moment in Tyler Perry's life came in his early 20s when he happened to watch an episode of The Oprah Winfrey Show. Oprah discussed how writing about one's experiences could be therapeutic and healing. Something cracked open. Perry began writing, not for an audience, but for survival. Those letters to himself grew into his first play. Spending his life savings of $12,000 to debut his first musical, Perry was disappointed that only 30 people were in attendance. After many failed attempts to restage the musical, which exhausted his resources, Perry became homeless. In late 1996, he spent 3 months sleeping in his car or homeless shelters. Perry's mother begged him to get a steady job, but he refused to give up on his writing. "I would not stop believing," Perry says. Then, 6 years after that first empty theater, his play finally found its audience. The black church community that Hollywood had decided did not exist turned out in their thousands. Diary of a Mad Black Woman opened at #1 in the U.S. in 2005 and introduced mainstream audiences to Perry's character, Madea. He has now written 24 feature films, 1,600 TV episodes for various series. By retaining ownership of all his intellectual property and by building a film studio, Perry had amassed a personal fortune of $1 billion by 2020, according to Forbes. And then came the moment that made the world stop. The property was originally the old Fort McPherson, a Confederate Army base, and the irony of a black man now owning the space was not lost on Perry. "Think about the poetic justice in that," he told Gayle King. "The Confederate Army is fighting to keep Negroes enslaved in America on this very ground, and now this very ground is owned by me." Today we analyze Tyler Perry not as a celebrity, but through the MKP lens, as a multiplier who took a gift forged in trauma and multiplied it into the most improbable entertainment empire in American history. A king who established sovereign dominion over a cultural domain that Hollywood had declared worthless, and a priest who has spent his entire career standing between the wound of black pain and the possibility of laughter, healing, and redemption. These principles are ancient. They were at work in Tyler Perry's life, whether he named them or not, and they are available to every one of us who will enact them. By the end, you will see how the principles of faithful multiplication, sovereign ownership, and bridge-building priesthood apply directly to your assignment, no matter how empty the theater looks right now. The multiplier analysis. from 30 people in a theater to a billion-dollar empire, identifying the meanness, the talent, the innate gift, the ability to transform personal pain into universal story. Tyler Perry's primary God-given currency was not acting ability, directing technique, or business acumen, though all three developed. It was something rarer and more irreplaceable, the ability to take the rawest, most private human suffering, abuse, abandonment, poverty, shame, and alchemize it into stories that made millions of people feel simultaneously seen, healed, and liberated to laugh. "The people who hurt me did not steal my compassion," he said. "They could not rob me of my heart and my care for others, and they could not grip away my ability to heal." This was his mina, not just storytelling, but redemptive storytelling, the ability to enter the wound and come back with something that heals rather than harms. This is an extraordinarily rare gift, and it was forged in the furnace of his earliest years. The opportunity, the strategic platform, an overlooked, underserved audience, the Black church community. Hollywood had looked at the Black church audience, tens of millions of faith-filled, family-oriented, culturally rich Black Americans, and decided they were not worth a film budget. This was Tyler Perry's mina. Not a prestigious platform, not a Hollywood deal, an audience that everyone else had dismissed as too niche, too religious, too regional to matter. Perry's plays reached an audience many in Hollywood weren't aware existed. He tells stories of dreamy Black heroines who find their voices, features beloved matriarchs who care for their families and solve problems with wisdom and peace, and hilarity that includes cultural in-jokes. He has created his own niche by tapping an untapped market. What looked like a limitation was in fact the most powerful competitive advantage in the entertainment industry, an entirely uncontested territory. The resource, the earned trust, 6 years of faithful revision, and an unbreakable belief. Perry was creative and liked to write, but what distinguished him from every other struggling artist was not talent. It was the 6-year period of faithful, relentless revision between that first empty theater in 1992 and the breakthrough moment in 1998, when his play finally found its audience. During those 6 years, he was broke, homeless, and rejected. He revised the play over and over. He did not change his vision, he deepened it. This is the resource the world never sees, the treasury of faithfulness built in the years of invisibility. It was this that the mina system rewarded, the MKP lens. Tyler Perry was given a gift forged in trauma, a platform everyone else had dismissed, and a treasury of 6 years' faithful, invisible work. His genius began in refusing to bury any one of them. The multiplication strategy. Phase 1. Faithful in the little. 6 years of an empty theater. The most important chapter of Tyler Perry's story is the one nobody celebrated. 6 years, broke, homeless, 30 people in the audience, his mother begging him to get a real job. These are not the footnotes of his success story. They are its foundation. Every revision of that play was an act of stewardship. Every night sleeping in his car on Sylvan Road, the same street where his studio now stands, was a deposit into a spiritual account that would one day pay 100-fold return. This is the parable of the Minas, enacted in real time. The servant who does not bury his talent, but keeps investing it, keeps working it, keeps believing in its value, even when the market has returned nothing. The faithfulness in the little is the prerequisite for authority over much. And Tyler Perry's little season lasted 6 years and cost him everything he had. Phase 2, strategic reinvestment, owning every frame. Once the breakthrough came, Perry did something that separated him permanently from every artist who had come before him in his lane. He refused to sell. Rather than acting in someone else's machine, Perry built a machine around his own intellectual property. His films were often produced on relatively modest budgets, but generated strong returns at the box office and through home video and streaming. The formula was not artistic prestige, it was financial durability. Because he retains ownership, when shows are syndicated or streamed, he benefits long-term. As Forbes noted, he has turned Hollywood on its head by flipping the usual model. Talent becomes owner, output becomes asset. His 25% equity stake in BET Plus gave him upstream financial participation in an entire streaming platform, not just production fees. He didn't just make content for the machine, he became a co-owner of the machine itself. Phase 3. Scaling influence, building an ecosystem of ownership and opportunity. Tyler Perry's establishment of Tyler Perry Studios has forever changed Atlanta by transforming it into a powerhouse for Black creatives. His commitment to ownership and independence has not only provided a platform for Black talent, but also attracted countless other creators, making the city a hub for diverse, self-made content. Perry has written 24 feature films, 20 stage plays, and 1,600 TV episodes for various series. The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences gave Perry its Jean Hersholt Humanitarian Award, complete with an Oscar statuette, in 2021 to recognize his charitable works. Netflix has become a reliable partner of Perry's. The director and producer signed a multi-year deal with the streaming giant in 2024 to make faith-based movies. The first is expected to be R&B, a modern retelling of the biblical love story about Ruth and Boaz. He is still multiplying, and the returns are still compounding. Core multiplier principle, the stewardship flywheel, trauma transformed into gift to faithful revision, in invisibility to audience trust built, content ownership secured, studio infrastructure built, platform for others created, greater cultural impact. He didn't just build a career, he built a self-reinforcing ecosystem where every faithful investment produced not just personal return, but expanded opportunity for an entire generation of Black creative talent. The King Analysis, dominion over the domain of Black storytelling and creative ownership, establishing the domain. Tyler Perry's kingdom was not the domain of prestige cinema, critical acclaim, or Hollywood's approved canon of Black storytelling. He planted his flag on territory that the industry had vacated, the intersection of Black faith, Black family, Black comedy, and Black healing. He declared, through every play and every film, that these stories deserved to be told with full creative sovereignty, and that the people who lived them deserved to own the telling of them. The marks of his reign, vision and governance, the law of creative sovereignty. Tyler Perry's first law was sovereignty, the conviction that the creator must own the creation. His commitment to ownership and independence has not only provided a platform for Black talent, but also attracted countless other creators, making the city a hub for diverse, self-made content. This shift has empowered Black filmmakers and artists to control their own narratives, build wealth, and shape the future of entertainment. He governed his creative domain with a discipline that the industry regularly misunderstood as stubbornness. He wrote, directed, produced, and starred in his own work, not because he lacked collaborators, but because he understood that creative sovereignty is not a luxury for an artist with his assignment. It is a non-negotiable. The story came from his community's wound. It would be owned by his community's son. Ethical authority, the currency of authentic representation. In a domain, Hollywood, where authority is built on critical approval, awards, and industry relationships, Tyler Perry built his authority on something Hollywood could neither grant nor revoke: the trust of an audience that had never seen itself accurately reflected on screen before him. His authority was not positional. No studio gave it to him. It was relational. Millions of black families gave it to him, one church basement screening at a time, because he told their stories with the fluency of someone who had lived them. That is a form of cultural authority that cannot be manufactured, imitated, or taken away. It can only be earned through the dangerous act of radical authenticity. Order and creation, building a kingdom on reclaimed ground. The most extraordinary act of creative dominion in Tyler Perry's story is not a film or a TV deal. It is 330 acres of red Georgia clay. Tyler Perry Studios stretches across 330 acres of land on what was Fort McPherson, a deactivated army base built by slaves and once used by the Confederate government during the Civil War. I built it in a neighborhood that is one of the poorest black neighborhoods in Atlanta, so that young black kids could see that a black man did that and they can too. This is creative dominion at its most prophetic. He did not just build a studio, he reclaimed ground. He reversed a curse. He took land that was consecrated to the purpose of black subjugation and reordered it by ownership, by purpose, and by presence, into a place of black creative authority. This is what a king does. He does not simply occupy his domain, he transforms it. Psalm 23 says, "He prepares a table before me in the presence of my enemies." Tyler Perry sat down at that table, on that very ground, and hosted a grand opening attended by Oprah Winfrey, Beyoncé, Denzel Washington, and the President of the United States. The 12 sound stages are named after black icons. The Confederate Army base became the home of black storytelling. This is the scripture made architectural. The King's Challenge, Battle and Legacy, the Kings of Hollywood Gatekeeping. For decades, Hollywood studios told Tyler Perry his audience did not exist, his stories did not matter, and his budget requests were not worth approving. His response was not to argue, it was to build. He bypassed the gate entirely by financing his own work, touring his plays directly to black church communities, and building his own distribution infrastructure. The kings of critical opinion. Tyler Perry has been one of the most consistently criticized major filmmakers in American entertainment history. Critics derided his work as formulaic, theologically simplistic, and artistically underdeveloped. Spike Lee publicly called his work coonery and buffoonery. Perry's response was not retreat. It was continued, disciplined production of stories for the audience he served. A king does not govern by the approval of those outside his domain. The kings of creative limitation. When the COVID-19 pandemic shut down every Hollywood production, Perry converted his studio into what he called Camp Quarantine, a self-contained production bubble that allowed him to continue producing 4 television series for BET and BET Plus, while every other studio went dark. This is kingly governance, the ability to adapt, innovate, and maintain productive order in his domain, even when the entire industry around him has collapsed. The MKP lens. Tyler Perry shows us that kingly dominion in the creative sphere does not require the approval of the existing powers. It requires the courage to build your own infrastructure, govern your own domain by your own values, and serve your own audience with total creative sovereignty, even when the critical establishment has written you off. The priest analysis. The bridge between black pain and the possibility of laughter, healing, and redemption. The priestly function. The priest stands in the gap. Tyler Perry's most profound and most personal role has been this priestly one, standing between the wounds of black America and the possibility of healing, between the trauma of abuse and the freedom of forgiveness, between the shame of poverty and the dignity of abundance. He has done this not from a pulpit, but from a stage, a sound stage, and a giving hand that has never forgotten what it felt like to be empty. The fourfold priestly ministry, creating sacred space, the theater as a sanctuary. Tyler Perry's earliest audiences were not cinema audiences, they were church congregations. His plays toured black churches, black theaters, and black community centers, spaces already consecrated to the work of gathering, healing, and truth-telling. He didn't create the sacred space. He recognized it, honored it, and built his entire creative infrastructure around it. His Madea character, a pistol-toting, scripture-quoting, truth-telling black grandmother, became one of the most powerful, sanctuary-creating characters in popular culture. Madea's home was a place where broken people were welcomed, fed, challenged, and sent back out into the world with more dignity than they arrived with. Every audience that laughed at Madea was also, without necessarily knowing it, being given permission to laugh at their own pain, and in that laughter to find release. This is one of the oldest and most sacred functions of the priestly office, creating a space where the unbearable becomes bearable, mediating values, translating the language of faith for the unchurched. A priest translates the holy for the people. Tyler Perry took the language of black faith, forgiveness, redemption, accountability, the grace of a second chance, and wrapped it in comedy, drama, and the vivid particularity of black family life in a way that reached people who would never have received it from a pulpit. Perry's movies often feature moral scoundrels, prostitutes, drug dealers, abusive husbands who find redemption via a combination of family and Christianity. He was not preaching, he was mediating, translating ancient kingdom values into the vernacular of the people who most needed them, using the medium they would actually engage with. This is precisely the priestly function, not to keep wisdom locked in the temple, but to carry it into the marketplace, the family room, and the wound. That never give up thing came from my mother and my aunts and the ministers and preachers in my family. I can trace the preachers back to slavery. My great-great-great-great-grandfather was a minister. That faith is in my DNA. He was not performing faith. He was transmitting a generational inheritance through the medium of storytelling, bringing healing, bearing burdens, and building solidarity. Tyler Perry's most powerful priestly acts have been the ones that cost him personally, the ones where he entered the suffering of others rather than simply observing it from a safe, creative distance. After Hurricane Katrina devastated the Gulf Coast in 2005, Perry funded the construction of 20 homes in New Orleans. The community has since been named Perry Place in his honor. He went back to the city of his wound and built homes on it. This is the priestly act of bearing burdens, not just acknowledging pain from a distance, but investing personal resources in its healing. Perry paid for all the groceries belonging to elderly shoppers at 44 Kroger stores in Atlanta and 29 Winn-Dixie stores in his native New Orleans in April 2020. He left a $21,000 tip at a restaurant to support out-of-work servers during the pandemic. He bought a $350,000 home for a gospel singer's family in need. He donated $100,000 to the legal defense fund of Breonna Taylor's boyfriend. These were not PR moments. They were the acts of a man who remembered what it felt like to be invisible and chose to make others visible with the resources that faithfulness had multiplied. In 2023, Perry donated $2.75 million to protect low-income senior citizens in Atlanta from displacement. The multi-year initiative pays off overdue property taxes for around 300 elderly homeowners and freezes property taxes for 100 seniors for 2 years, shielding people who had spent entire lifetimes building their homes from losing them to a city's economic growth that had simply moved on without them. This was not charity, it was structural priesthood, standing between a generation of vulnerable people and the machinery of erasure, and using personal resources to buy them time, dignity, and the right to remain on their own ground. That last act carries particular weight when held alongside his king story. The man who reclaimed 330 acres of Confederate ground for black creative ownership is the same man ensuring elderly black homeowners do not lose the ground they already own. The theme running through his entire story is consistent. Ground matters, ownership matters, and the priestly calling is to use whatever resources faithfulness has produced to protect both. For those who cannot protect it themselves. The people who hurt me did not steal my compassion, he said. I have turned toward all of that pain, threw my arms wide open, embraced every bit of it, stared the shame, went down in it, and took the power out of it so that I could heal. He bore his own burdens publicly, not for sympathy but for solidarity. He said to every person who had ever been abused, abandoned, or ashamed, I was there too, and I am still here. And so are you. Prophetic voice. Naming the wound and declaring the promise. A priest has a prophetic duty to speak truth to power and call the community back to its higher values. Tyler Perry's establishment of Tyler Perry Studios built it in one of the poorest black neighborhoods in Atlanta, so that young black kids could see that a black man did that, and they can too. This was not an act of charity. It was a prophetic declaration. The ground that was used to diminish you will be the ground from which your liberation is announced. His BET Awards speech naming the Confederate history of his studio land was prophetic preaching without a pulpit. His Netflix deal to retell the story of Ruth and Boaz, one of Scripture's greatest stories of faithfulness, redemption, and the surprising sovereignty of God, through the medium of popular film, is the act of a priest who has never stopped believing that ancient truth, given new clothing, can reach people who desperately need it. The MKP lens. Are you the creative who uses your art to give voice to the community that no one else is telling stories for, creating sacred space? Are you translating the language of faith, wisdom, or healing into a form your specific audience can actually receive? Mediating values. Do you return to the place of your wound, not to be defined by it, but to build something on it for the next generation? Bearing burdens. Are you using your platform to name what was broken and declare what is now possible? Prophetic voice. Biblical alignment. The principles illuminated. Tyler Perry's story is not instructive because of his faith. Though he is a man of deep and confessed Christian conviction, it is instructive because the principles governing his life are ancient, universal, and woven into the architecture of creation itself. We are not canonizing Tyler Perry. We are excavating the principles. The multiplier, parable of the Minas, Luke 19:11-27. Because you have been trustworthy in a very small matter, take charge of 10 cities. 6 years, an empty theater, a sleeping bag in a car. These were not obstacles to Tyler Perry's multiplication. They were the qualifying examination for it. The ancient principle is clear: faithfulness with the little, maintained across years of invisible, unrewarded, costly investment, is the divine prerequisite for authority over much. His $12,000 became $1 billion, not because of luck or talent alone, but because he treated every revision, every empty show, every night of faithfulness as a deposit into a kingdom account that would one day yield a 100-fold return. The King. Psalm 23:5, Isaiah 54:2-3. He prepares a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Enlarge the place of your tent. Do not hold back. Lengthen your cords, strengthen your stakes, for you will spread out to the right and to the left. The 330 acres of Fort McPherson is Psalm 23:5 made architectural. Ground that was consecrated to the purpose of oppression became the table prepared in the presence of enemies. The principle at work is not revenge. It is the sovereign reordering of territory by a king who understands that dominion is not taken by force, but by faithful, purposeful occupation. Tyler Perry did not storm the Confederate base. He bought it. He built on it. He named it after himself. And then he invited the world to come and see what God can do when a faithful steward is trusted with ground. The priest. 2 Corinthians 1:3-4, Joel 2:25. The God of all comfort who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God. I will restore to you the years that the swarming locust has eaten. Tyler Perry is one of the most complete modern enactments of 2 Corinthians 1:3-4 in popular culture. Every wound he received became a resource for the healing of others. His abuse became the material for stories that gave language to the abuse of millions. His homelessness became the empathy that drove his philanthropy for the homeless. His shame became the solidarity that made millions feel less alone in theirs. The comfort he received through his mother, through the church, through the act of writing. He has spent his entire career distributing to others. And Joel 2:25 speaks directly to the years the locust ate. 6 years of an empty theater, a childhood stolen by violence, a name changed to escape a wound. The principle declares what was taken can be restored, not just repaired, but multiplied beyond what was lost. Tyler Perry's studio standing on that Confederate ground is Joel 2:25 in brick and mortar. The MKP takeaway: these principles do not belong to any denomination. They are not the exclusive property of the church. They are the operating system of creation, and they produce a harvest in any life that enacts them with faithfulness, courage, and a refusal to bury the gift. Tyler Perry's story urges us to ask, what years has the locust eaten in your life that God is waiting to restore and multiply beyond what you lost? Your MKP challenge. Tyler Perry multiplied a gift forged in trauma through 6 years of faithful, invisible investment into the most improbable entertainment empire in American history. He established sovereign dominion over a creative domain that Hollywood had declared worthless, and built his kingdom literally on the ground of his ancestors' oppression. And he has spent his entire career standing in the gap between black pain and the possibility of healing, laughter, and redemption, returning to every wound with the resources that faithfulness produced and building something on it for the next generation. We are not canonizing Tyler Perry. We are excavating the principles, and those principles are available to every one of us. For the multiplier, what is your empty theater season? What gift are you currently revising, investing in, and believing in, despite a market that has not yet validated it? How many of Perry's 6 years have you given yours? And critically, are you still in the room, still working, still faithful? Or have you buried the mina because the audience hasn't arrived yet? For the king, what is the Confederate ground in your domain? The territory that was designed to diminish you or people like you, that your assignment might be calling you to occupy, reclaim, and transform. And what does creative sovereignty look like in your field? Are you building in someone else's machine or building your own? For the priest, what is the wound in your story that you have not yet turned into a resource for someone else's healing? Tyler Perry did not turn his abuse into art despite the pain. He turned it into art because of the pain. What comfort have you received that you have not yet distributed? Who is waiting for the story only your wound can tell? For the business owner and creator, Perry's defining move was ownership of his content, his land, his platform. What are you currently creating that you do not own? What would it cost you to begin building infrastructure around your gift, rather than renting space in someone else's? What is your Fort McPherson, and when do you break ground? This week, pick one of those roles, multiplier, king, or priest, and act on it deliberately. And if Tyler Perry's story stirred something in you about the season of the empty theater, hold on. The audience is coming. The table is being prepared. The ground is already yours. You just haven't broken ground yet. You may not have 330 acres, but you have ground. You have a gift that was forged in a fire the world didn't see. You have an audience that nobody else is making content for. And you have a wound that, in the hands of the right principle, becomes the very material of someone else's miracle. Go and multiply, rule and bridge right where you are. The table is already prepared.